Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be on the ice with Joel Nelson, and we're going to be talking everything that you need to know to catch fish on dead sticks this winter. And we're not going to waste any time. We're going to jump right into the info. Here's how Joel likes to utilize dead sticks.
I typically won't set up dead sticks at the beginning of a bite because I want to ensure that I'm seeing fish first on the electronics and then eventually catch a few jigging, or at least see them jigging. After that though, I like to employ 1 to 2 dead sticks just to see if a stationary bite setup isn't going to produce more fish than will jigging. So that's my first step, right? I get a few out. From there, I let the fish tell me. If the dead sticks start going hot, there are days you're just gonna have them out on the ice where no matter how hard you jig, no matter what you jig with, live bait on dead sticks will simply outproduce almost everything. Don't fight the fish. When they want dead sticks, give them as many as they want. Have 4 to 6 in your lineup ready to deploy as your be-all, end-all. But more often, it's a mixture, right? We've got a couple out and you're jigging all around the outside edges and catching fish here and there as you go. When the bite slows down, you have to determine, is it because of where you're at? Is it because of the jigging and they're avoiding that? Or is it because they're avoiding everything, including very simple, stable live bait presentations? And if that's the case, well, then it's definitely a good time to consider moving. And it's hard because once you have your dead sticks out, a lot of people get pretty married to those locations. That's exactly when you can't be afraid to strip these things down and head to a new spot out on the ice.
Now let's get into some fish snapping dead stick action.
Oh, that's a nicer fish. You know, dead sticks have just been popping. And, don't fight the bite. If the fish want to eat a dead stick, I'm not gonna deny them that, right? So as much as I would love to catch some of these fish jigging, we will. But when the dead stick and bite is going down, make it happen, right? Get your dead sticks out. And that's really been a key component to today's 1-2 punch. If you're not having your dead sticks out, you're just not going to be getting as many fish. And this one does not want to turn his head up the hole. Come on, buddy. Just trying to apply some nice steady pressure so we don't want to catch on the side of the hole. Come on. Come on, there he comes. And that is a nice walleye. Whew. You know, this lake right now is just chock full of fish like this. And he absolutely lunchboxed it. And I want to show you what I've been doing with some of my dead sticks. You know, people might not think about this as a dead stick bait, but this is a wonderful little bait. This eyeball spoon has just been a wonderful addition to the Northland lineup, and not just for jigging, right? It's not just for jigging anymore. Fish key in on eyes. It's been long known, they've been painting eyes on lures for forever. And fish absolutely love having that big eye to fixate on. So I love dropping it on a dead stick because you've got the real thing. You've got the live minnow and you've got this great big eyeball staring right at the fish. And I really think, as far as a set line dead stick bait, that eyeball spoon is just a wonderful addition. And fish like this go back. This is a low 20s inch fish, so hold on, girl. It's a gas, but it's chaos, right? I mean, that's what dead sticking's all about. It brings out the kid in me because you got rods popping off all over, and now we rebait and do it again.
Now, if you want to hang live bait down in the water for fish to come over and snap, there's a few different ways you can do it. Dead sticks are one of those ways. You can also use tip ups. There's bobber rigging setups, a bunch of different things you can do. But here's why Joel tends to prefer dead sticking.
I do think there are a few disadvantages to dead sticking, primarily being, a tip up or a iFish Pro out in the background there. You can see from further away, but the advantages in my mind far outweigh the negatives. And the first bit you can just see visually right now. I can see everything that minnow is doing. And right now, that minnow is telegraphing what I need to know. It's telling me, is there a fish down there? I could pull the graph out and really see and understand how that bait was being affected, what the fish is looking at, what it's doing. When I get a bite, it's gonna load up solid, and eventually start bowing its way down to the ice. With the idea being that once you pair it with one of these free spooling type reel systems, the line, just with a click of a switch, peels out effortlessly. The fish can take what it wants. Then when it's got the bait in its mouth, you can just grab it, reel it, set the hook, and you're done. One thing you'll see with a good dead stick rod, this is a St. Croix Deadeye rod, is that the tip is ultra flexible. You need that, right? You gotta have that amount of flexibility for the minnow and the walleye to take what it needs until this free spool engages. So from there, you also need a stiff backbone, right? Because when it is time to put a hook to the fish, you need to get that whole bend out of the rod and get down to a heavier portion of the butt section that allows you to drive that hook home. Really important with dead stick fishing. As you can see, I've got it on a simple, cheap $3 rod holder, and these things, they're nice to have around, but obviously they're not creme de la creme. They're somewhat disposable. You're gonna bend them, you're gonna ruin some along the way, but it is nice to be able to very cheaply have numerous options to be able to lay the dead sticks out. An even better version we're gonna show you on a bucket in a little bit, and that's the catch cover rod holder. And that one's great because it's a flexible arm that mounts onto a bucket, and you can literally position that arm wherever you need it to be, and it does a much better job of bowing the whole rod to the hole when it's actually time and a fish eats it.
Now, like Joel mentioned, we're gonna be running through a bunch of different setups that you can use to mount your dead stick up above the hole. But before we do that, first things first, let's get into some of the componentry that's actually on the rod, all the way from the rod down to the business end.
So we've already talked about needing a good dead stick, a good quality Deadeye rod like I've got here. But from there, there's a lot of componentry that you can really get into the weeds with, and just follow me here. We'll go through some of the things that you need to set up an effective dead stick. First off, you obviously got to have a quality line, 6 to 8 pound fluorocarbon. What I have found is that larger fluorocarbon is a little bit more, prone to memory, has more kinks and issues. I do run a larger size reel. The 500 series reels are fine, but the 1000 size series reels are really nice to be able to deal with walleyes, have a little bit heavier line, and then these are larger spool arbors, so I feel like I have less memory issues with the larger spinning reels, and that's really a nice thing. But speaking of reels, this one has this bait runner switch, which is really nice. You simply flip it up, and very slowly and easily fish can peel line out of that without any effort and really without feeling it. And that's the key component to it, right? They need to be able to pick up that line, pick up that bait, and grab it without ever feeling the resistance there. So that's a key part of that setup. We talked a little bit about the rod holder, but after you start talking about reel, rod, line, you gotta start thinking about the business end of what you got going on here. Now, we obviously know it is a live bait scenario, and so typically you're gonna tip this with a live minnow, not just the head of a minnow, but a free swimming live minnow. As far as bait is concerned, shiners, my number one. I love fishing with shiners when you can. They're harder to find, harder to keep alive. They are more expensive, so there are some drawbacks. We're using some reds, some creek chub type like bait here. Just a little extra thump kick, a little bit of extra advantage there, I feel. But now you have to start talking about your tackle and your tackle components, and you might be curious to see that I've got a spoon on here, an eyeball spoon. And I have 3 primary endpoint rigs that I use on all my dead sticks. The first one, very simple, single plain hook. Now that hook can either be a single plain hook or it can be a treble hook, but it is a plain hook nonetheless. Now check your rules and regulations depending on the state that you're in for the hooks that you're using on trebles. Some of them need to have a little bit of flash or a blade to be considered a lure and be legal. But I run those situations in the utmost of stealth modes. Clear water, I run it in areas where fish are pressured, get a lot of hammering. So that's typically when I'll run a bare hook scenario with a weight anywhere 8 to 12 inches above it. If it's a real big bait, I might bring it down 4 to 6 inches closer to keep that bait from swimming around. The second type lure I use is just a simple bladed spoon. It's got a single hook on it. having a little bit of color and flash as an attractant is really nice there. And the third is something like this, which is really nice because, again, this eyeball jig allows the bait to swim, and you have a little bit of separation and a little bit of wobble and a little bit of intrigue. You get to add color to the presentation. Quite often I use just some of the silver metallic colors like gold, but in a stained water environment like we are here in Upper Red Lake, I'm going to be using something that's really bright, really visible. That eyeball gives just a ton of attraction, and then you still have your live bait offering. The downside to any kind of a jig, whether it be that single bladed bait that I'm talking about, or whether we're talking about you know, a jig like this eyeball jig, is that it has some weight to it, and fish can feel that. So when they take off running with it, as they're munching the bait and trying to feel things, they might feel the heft of this lure and drop it. We've had a couple drop it here today. In that instance, we're gonna switch to what we have in that hole over there, which is just a single plain hook. Almost weightless. They don't feel it in their mouth as easily. They can run with it, giving you plenty of time to be able to come back and set the hook. So from a tackle and componentry perspective, that's kind of what I run and why. And you know, I don't think there is a wrong answer in terms of baits you can use on here. These are just ones I've had success with in the past.
Now let's get a little bit deeper into how Joel likes to strategically place his dead sticks in order to key in the bite and figure out what's happening on the ice.
I want them somewhat close to me. That said, I don't want them right on top of me, so I do like covering a couple different areas and different options. Today, we're out on Upper Red Lake, and ice heaves are the structure that we're fishing. So I'm gonna have a couple of dead sticks up against the structure, and maybe one of them or two of them off of structure for a bigger group. And again, the idea is taking the temperature of the fish, figuring out where they are, and more importantly, where are the active fish that are eating dead stick type presentations. So the key thing with dead sticks is that you can't be afraid to move your sets. An old Toad Smith article from way back in the day in Fisherman always stuck with me. Always tend the set. Now that applies for tip-ups like they were talking. It certainly applies with dead sticks. Tend the set. If you have a dead rod that hasn't gone off in a while, it's in a dead, unproductive area, move it. If all of your bites are coming up against structure, which today in this case is ice heaves, get them all up there, or at least 2/3 of them, 3/4 of them. If everything is happening out in no man's land, go put them there. You know, so often a common presentation is going to be along a break line for walleyes, and that's just standard practice, right? Maybe you're evening fishing. What I like to do in those scenarios is use my dead stick rods as indicators of fish migration up to structure. So I'll set a dead stick rod out from me, I'll set a dead stick rod up shallower than me, and I'll jig somewhere in the middle, with the idea having been that, you know, if you have a fish trip the rod out deeper, maybe it is the start of the incoming evening bite as fish move their way from depths up to shallow structure to feed. So again, I don't just use my dead stick as a means to have a stationary means to catch fish. I use my dead sticks as real indicators for the bite, indicators of when I should stay or when I should go, and indicators of where I should be fishing.
Now another strategy that I like to utilize a ton out on the ice is I'll take my dead stick and actually put it right next to my active jigging rod. And usually when I'm doing this, I'm typically using something that's a little bit more aggressive, like a rip and shad or a puppet minnow. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna draw fish to my hole, and maybe the fish won't be active enough to strike a hard bait like that, but it's definitely possible that they might sneak over to the dead stick hole that's just a couple feet away and grab that minnow, because that's something a little bit more realistic, obviously. And so that's just something to think about when you're out on the ice as well. But now we're gonna change gears and we're gonna look at all those different mounting options that we talked about earlier.
So speaking of rod holders, there's a couple different options or ways that you can set up your dead stick, and you know, this is a very simple yet effective one. It's cheap, it's a little bit hokey, they're $3 a piece, but for all the bad that is, means a lot of good because they are cheap. You can afford to have 4, 5, 6 of them with you at any time. It's fairly easy to figure out. You set it in the holder, you're good to go, and it's just that simple. So let's check out a couple more. So here you have a little bit more of an elaborate setup. It is the rod holder from Catch Cover. It's a flexible rod holder, so it bends in any position you want. You can mount it on a bucket like we have here, the edge of a fish house, an ATV. But the real crux of it is this kind of rotating holder portion. As long as you put the T or the foot of the reel right in here in the stanchion, it makes it almost impossible for a fish to rip it free and to take it down the hole and steal it from you, so that's important. But it also rotates down and bends to bow to the fish, making it easy for the line to come off of that bait feeder reel. So it's a really solid setup and a great option as a rod holder. So here's another neat rod holder option. It's kind of a tip down feature where it allows that tip to completely drop as the fish takes the bait. Now, you've already got some of that built into the rod itself, but this is a nice option too because it really is balanced. It is allowing you to fish for anything from walleyes to even crappies and perch, right? Panfish will readily be able to take this and pull it down without feeling any resistance. So that's really the popular play there when it comes to these style holders. But the key to these, don't put it here. You could, if it balanced, you could put it there, but that's how you lose your rod down the hole, right? You got to make sure that you put that reel seat behind that edge and that lip to ensure that when a fish takes it, it doesn't take the whole works. So here you have a very primitive means of holding your fishing rod. I don't advise it unless you absolutely need to in a pinch. It will work, right? Sitting it on top of a bucket is probably the oldest form of a dead stick rod holder you've ever seen. You know, if it's a fancier rod, it's a nicer rod like this one is here, you might even consider just kind of lifting that edge of the lid there, lifting that handle and dropping it in just to make sure the fish doesn't take it all the way down the hole. But especially in the instance where you're jigging maybe right next door, it'd be just fine to be able to watch that rod tip as long as you are paying attention. And hey, you've got no excuses now. You can always be able to dead stick.
Now there are a ton of different options for mounting a dead stick, and like Joel said, as long as you have a bucket, you don't have any excuses. You could totally be running a dead stick, and you totally should be running a dead stick. But before we wrap things up, Joel has a couple parting shots.
So there you have it. When it comes to dead sticks, there's really not a wrong time or wrong place, wrong way to fish for them, as long as you are fishing with them. And specifically when it comes to season, you know, again, there is no wrong time to be fishing them. You should be employing them as part of your strategy year round. Now, I really find they start to excel once you get into mid-season and live bait becomes all that much more enticing, all that much more sometimes required to get a bite. So make sure once you do get to mid-season, you're absolutely mixing them into your setup. But go ahead and try them year round. Early ice, late ice, it's a great way to get bit.
Now this video got a little bit lengthy, but I really think that we covered down on just about everything you need to know to catch fish on dead sticks this winter. And it's a really important piece to have in your arsenal because it'll really help you catch a lot more fish. It'll help you cover more water, and it's just a great tool to have. Now, if you learned something in this video, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below because we have a lot more awesome videos coming that you're not going to want to miss. So stay tuned. We will see you in the next one.